Hello and welcome to this very quick video around Dashware. Now I did a video a little while ago and I'll put a link down below that talks about how to use it with iNav. I'm planning to do videos after such a great reaction to that initial video on other things as well. It would be really nice to be able to use it with OpenTX log files from things like your Taranis or your Radio Master, and it would also be handy to do it with things like RD Pilot 2. There's some gotchas in there as well, and I've also been thinking about a video on how to manipulate data files. So if you have a data file of any description, really, you can map it and use it into Dashware. So there's lots of things coming, but this video is one of the more basics, and that's how you play around with gauges. By default, with the template that you select when you create the project, you can drag your video and you can drag your data file into it, just like I did in that other video, and then you can set it up and the gauges are there by default. However, the gauges are incredibly versatile and you can make them do pretty much anything, including creating your own. So in this video, I'm just going to jump on the computer and show you some of the basic stuff. So if you're starting to get into Dashware and playing around, it'll save you some of the things that I had to try and find by trial and error. Okay, so here we are in the application. This is a pretty standard layout. That just happens to be a gauge that I've made, believe it or not. And the way it works is that the battery kind of goes up and down to kind of show you the relative voltage. I might do another video if there's enough interest on how I've actually made that, but for now we'll just get rid of that. Now this is a pretty standard layout with the exception of my painless pill for the GoPro layout. We've got the GPS stuff up here. Again, you can move things around. You can also change their size if that's what you want to do to make them easier to see. If you want to add another gauge, you can go into the gauge toolbox, find a gauge that you're interested in and drag it into position. And then as you move things around, the gauges will magically work. But you can also change stuff that's already on here relatively easily. Now if I go back into the project, we have our video file and our log file. What you can see here is this at the moment is a plot of the speed. So as I go around, you can see that it's relating to the speed that's shown here on the speedometer here at the side. If I click on it, you can see here in the project gauges box, it's highlighted. If we double click on that, it will ask us what the data value is that we want to show in that particular graph. Now, these are all of the headings that if you open the CSV file, you would find listed. So if we did something like, let's find something that will have a nice trace. So something like altitude, for example, in feet, and click OK. That is now the graph for altitude. And you can do that with any of the gauges. The thing is, what you'll notice is that when I'm changing stuff, if I move that over there, you see it still says speed tracker at the bottom. If we wanted this to show feet, then obviously the legend is wrong and you can edit all the gauges. So let's do that next. If we go into the gauge toolbox, there are two types of gauges in the project. The first is like this circle. If I just double click on this, you can see here that this gauge is actually made up of several elements. First is a filled ellipse, second is a smaller ellipse, third is a g-force plot, and they're linked to two of the gauge inputs, which are for the acceleration stuff. Now this is a graphic, so what you could do is you could click on the filled ellipse. We see at the moment it's a black color. I'll tell you what, if I go for that one, we could actually change the color quite easily and have like a bright red color. Click OK and click OK and it will save it. I would always recommend, if you're going to play with a gauge, I would click on this, which is clone gauge. Just give it a new name, something so it's different, and then I would actually then change that one, and that way then the original gauge is there, and if you decide you want to change it or you're doing something with it and it messes it up, then you can go back. So let's get rid of that, save it, there we go. So now I have a different version of the gauge. That's one type. The other type are these kind here, where what it actually is an image. So this, if we go into the folder where the Dashware stuff is kept, so this is the gauge folder. If we go in here, which one is this one? This is speed knots. There we go. So here you can actually see the different elements that make it up. So you have the background, you have the needle that's actually going to rotate. The cool thing is that if you have a graphic to act as a background, then you can do it. And the way it works is that the needle, which is the bit that swings around, is the bit that's actually set to a value, and you can do some really cool stuff. I'm not going to go too far into this, but I just wanted to let you know that those two things were here. So to actually change the elements in a gauge that's in something already is also very easy. We can also do it through this main panel. We don't have to be in the gauge toolbox. So at the moment, this is the gauge that we changed before. This is actually showing, if we double click on it, it's showing the altitude rather than the speed. And we can see it says speed tracker. Now we don't want to do that. We want it to say alt tracker or altitude tracker. Now we can change that quite easily within the gauge itself. First thing I'd always do, of course, is to change the name of it, make a clone. So we're going to call that alt chart. So now we've got the two bits done. What we'll do is that's the altitude, that's the speed. Let's get rid of the speed one, just leave the altitude one. So the altitude chart is there. What we can do is we can click on the edit project gauge and we can view, zoom out a little bit so we can see it. These are all the different elements again that are making up the gauge, all the different pieces, and you can either click on them or you can click on the piece here to select the bit you're interested. Or after the text, if we double click the text, we can then type in, let's do it on capitals, and that kind of goes with the rest of it. Come out, click save, and there we are. It now says alt tracker. And we can resize that, put it wherever we want, and we're all set. Now you can also import gauges and you can export gauges as well and do some really, really cool stuff. But hopefully that's helped you a little bit. If you want to kind of change cute things in here, then the easiest way to do it is actually just double click on whichever gauge you have in the image already, and it will allow you to pick the actual column from the data file so that you can pop it in and then show it. And then if you need to change it, you can actually then go into the edit for that, and then you can change the individual pieces of text that you need so that it's actually the right way around. So rather than maybe miles per hour, it could be kilometers per hour instead. But again, before you do anything, a big tip: always clone the gauge that you're playing with so that you've always got the other one to go back to if you make a mistake. Thank you for spending your time today watching that video. You can find me in all the usual places on social media, and if you're trying to learn about a subject, then check out the playlist. All of my videos are organized into easy to follow playlists that, if you're trying to learn a topic, will take you from the basics right the way through to some pretty advanced stuff.